What is up, everybody? Happy NFL Week 4 coming up, and this is another episode of Down to the Wire. I am joined by guest host here, Jeff Bell of FootballGuys.com. Unfortunately, Dan is out enjoying his vacation for the week. Dan, we'll see you next week. But Jeff, it's great to have you here, man. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Absolutely. Great friends over at Champions Round. And when you reached out, I jumped at the opportunity. Certainly happy to help. Definitely happy to help a fellow football guy, but also Champions Round as well. Fantastic website, fantastic group of content creators over there. So check it out if you have not. But again, thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's get to it. All right. We are going to, in this episode, like every episode, we're going to talk about the top pickups by position, right? We're going to talk to you about who you can drop. This player does no longer needs to be on your roster. Who are some preemptive ads and what defenses you can target here as you look ahead to the coming weeks. So that is our summary of what we're going to talk about. Let's get into who you can add. All right, who should you pick up? This is what we've got, starting with quarterback, okay? We've got Trevor Lawrence as number one, and let's talk about Lawrence a little bit here. He's got 2 top 12 finishes so far in 3 games, and we know the Jaguars are kind of surprising. They've outscored their opponent in their last 2 games 62-10. So, I mean, that's impressive. I mean, we're starting to see what Lawrence is all about, right?
We are, definitely. And I think there were a lot of questions about him coming into the season. And we are seeing that guy that everybody was so excited about last year at the draft that made him that number 1 pick unquestionably by a distance. And, playing for Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson really seems to be getting the best out of him. And if you remember back when Doug Peterson had early Carson Wentz in Philadelphia, Carson Wentz was an elite fantasy quarterback at that time too. And so I think that there's some translation between the skill sets between him and Trevor Lawrence when it comes to they have a little bit of rushing ability, the ability to attack vertically down the field, and we love his fit in this offense so far.
Yep, I like it, and history repeating itself. It kind of sounds like. So, Lawrence, would you start him in a 1 quarterback league?
I would. I'm at the point now where I think that there's a group of those veteran quarterbacks that kind of landed towards that back end QB1 that we're just not seeing production out of, and I don't know if there's ever been a year where I don't know what it is this year, but so many guys are showing their age so quickly, and it just kind of scares me if you're somebody that's relying on a player like Tom Brady or a player like Matthew Stafford. We just haven't seen those big weeks. Yep. And, they've had some matchups that you would think they'd take advantage of, but it just doesn't seem like that's the way those teams want to win. And so Lawrence, the way he's playing, I think that you almost have to make that move.
Yep, I like it. Lawrence is our top quarterback pickup. Jared Goff, man. What about Jared Goff? Well, the Lions have scored 95 points. Only the Ravens have scored more. And Goff's got 7 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. And he's got a Seattle this week as an opponent. So, and it's at home in Detroit. So that's another good sign for Goff. A couple words from you on Goff, a surprise for you?
He's a guy we were talking about Scott Fishbowl pre-show, and I've got him on my Scott Fishbowl team. I was kind of excited, hopeful for him coming into the season, and he's showing out. And I think that a lot of his production, we've seen him be an elite fantasy quarterback before, but I think a lot of people wrote that off as Sean McVay kind of pulling the strings. Mm-hmm. Goff was out there making those throws, and he has that ability. He was the 2nd overall pick in the draft, and so, I think he was the 1st overall pick in the draft, maybe.
First.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's got that talent, and he's producing for fantasy. The one thing that I'm a little bit concerned about with him would be the status of Amon-Ra St. Brown. And we already know that DeAndre Swift is likely out of that offense. Is Amon-Ra St. Brown going to be limited? And kind of that raises some questions on who's he really got for weapons.
Right. From what I understand, St. Brown is going to be okay with that ankle injury. But yeah, still, you're unsure about exactly how many snaps he'll have and what his involvement will be. So, all right, let's jump ahead to Geno Smith. And a lot of times, especially, as we get into the season a little bit more and the players start to get picked, we're looking more at matchups. So Geno Smith has a game at Detroit this week. Tell me why that's a good matchup.
So Detroit is 31st they're 2nd in allowing quarterback points to the fantasy quarterbacks. They've been in these shootout games, and we've seen quarterbacks take advantage of that defense. Geno Smith has played poised, and he's really played surprisingly well versus where people expected. Plus, he's got weapons on the outside there with DK Metcalf, with Tyler Lockett. If they get into a back and forth shootout, that's really where he's going to be able to lay out some fantasy production for you.
Got it. And Jacoby Brissett, also a decent matchup at Atlanta. He came off of that big week 3 Thursday night game against Pittsburgh. Kind of surprising. So maybe we see a little bit more from him. Amari Cooper seems to be the guy. David Njoku, who we'll talk about with the tight ends, also getting some play. Brissett against Atlanta. Sounds like another good matchup there too.
Yeah, we've seen 3 games from Atlanta so far, and they've all been back and forth shootouts. And so that Atlanta offense has a lot of pieces. They're able to score points, and that defense does not have a lot to stopping people. And I think you saw the comfort between the last 2 weeks between Amari Cooper and Jacoby Brissett, kind of a Cooper emerging as that number 1 receiver. Plus, Brissett brings a little bit of that rushing floor too. And when I'm looking for a deep dart throw, I'm looking for a matchup, and I'm looking for a player that can rush the ball a little bit as well.
Yep, I like it. And also with that same matchup there, Marcus Mariota against Cleveland. Now, Cleveland's got a little bit stronger of a pass rush, a little bit better of a defense, but Mariota has that dual threat ability who can run. So he's on this list. And it's a little bit further down, but he's someone that you could potentially target, especially in 2 quarterback leagues if one happened to be available there.
Yeah, we've seen Mariota week 1 had 70 rushing yards. Last week he had a rushing touchdown. So he's another guy that brings that rushing floor. He's flirting with being a quarterback 1 production on the season. And, he's got those weapons, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and that defense again that we already mentioned that's going to give up plenty of points.
Yep. And the last guy on our list here is Zach Wilson. This is more like a stash or a what the heck type of flex type of pickup here. Joe Flacco playing pretty well with the Jets. I think he got like top 14 numbers right now. Flacco. What can Wilson do coming off that knee injury? Second year, you know how these quarterbacks generally like to, improve during that time. Maybe we see an improved Zach Wilson. It's kind of a dart throw, but it's out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Flacco, 2 games, over 50 pass attempts, 155 pass attempts on the season. That defense has really struggled to stop people, and that they haven't been able to run the ball. And so they've shown a willingness to throw it with Joe Flacco. One would hope they would keep that willingness to throw it with their 2nd overall pick last year, Zach Wilson.
Yep. All right. Well, our quarterbacks. Well, let's take a look at the running backs. So, yeah, Jamal Williams, my goodness, if he's available, I think he's your absolute top pick here. And if you've got all the FOB money available, I would put it on him because he's likely going to be the Lions starting running back until probably week 7. They're saying that DeAndre Swift, who has that shoulder injury, shoulder separation, will be held out until after their week 6 bye. So we're looking at Jamal Swift as someone who already has 2 games worth of 2 touchdowns. So he has that going for him. And we already talked about the Lions scoring 95 points already. So yeah, I mean, we like Jamal Williams quite a bit. So he's our top guy. Anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, so Dan Campbell coming up from the Saints, and I think they really envisioned that split where you had Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram, and I think that Jamal Williams is the Mark Ingram in that split. Now with DeAndre Swift, the Alvin Kamara out of the lineup, it's all going to be on Williams, I think, mainly. But this is a play that if he's still available, which, get all over that because he's showing that he is usable even with Swift in the lineup.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Good call. All right. Next, we've got Khalil Herbert, and he's taking over for David Montgomery, who has got that knee as well as an ankle injury. And the Bears are running 186.7 rushing yards per game. And Herbert had 20 carries for 157 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. We're expecting Montgomery to be out for multiple games. This is a good pickup, and he's most likely, like you said about Williams, most likely going to have a role regardless even when he comes back, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the question, if the Bears were to go on a little bit of a losing streak, and if Khalil Herbert is established themselves, David Montgomery is in a contract year, and they might look to trade him. That might be one of those things where they maybe think they can capitalize, get a draft pick, trade him out, and just ride with Khalil Herbert as the running back. So you have to grab him if he's available, because this might be a guy that you can play all year long and give you even close to running back 1 production.
Ooh, I like that spicy take about trading Montgomery potentially if once he's healthy. Like that. All right. Alexander Madison is a potential fill-in for Dalvin Cook, who's out with a shoulder dislocation. Another shoulder injury here among running backs. Wow. We like Madison. He's come in before and he's done well. I've got a really cool stat for you here. In 11 games where he has had 12 carries or more, in 7 of those games, he has rushed for either 90 yards or scored a touchdown. So when he gets opportunity, he does pretty well. That's Alexander Madison for you. And he already sort of has a little bit of a role, even though it's mostly like 60-40 Dalvin Cook. But with Cook out, Madison jumps right in, right?
Yeah, and in the past, obviously they have a new coaching staff there, but they've shown the willingness with this core to ride Madison as a really a bell cow back when given opportunity. And so, again, Dalvin Cook missing time, you need to go out and get these guys. I think that last couple of weeks we've had a little bit of a quieter waiver wire. These are all top 3 backs that are going to be running back 1 level production as long as they're the main back in the lineup.
Yep, there you go. And we got Samaje Perine in here as a potential pickup if Joe Mixon can't go this Thursday against Miami. Mixon, of course, had that ankle injury that could keep him out. I don't know. Your thoughts there? This is more of like a what if type scenario here for Perine. In fact, he's almost like a preemptive pickup, if you will.
Yeah, I think he maybe skirts that a little bit there, but obviously we saw the ankle for Joe Mixon on a short week. I think the expectation is Joe Mixon will be ready to go, but Joe Mixon has not looked good so far this year, and Perine has been a player that they've felt comfortable using in the passing game, and if Mixon were out of the lineup, again, this is another guy that you're going to start in most lineups.
Here you go. And Craig Reynolds is just another fill-in here for Detroit. He had an 80-yard game and a 100-yard game last year, so he's got a little bit of success behind him. He's someone who maybe could make some noise in a team that, third time I'm saying this, scored 95 points. So, yeah, Craig Reynolds, he's kind of a deeper dart throw, but he might have a role.
Yeah, and I love these trailing waivers. You know, these guys that everybody's going to go big on your league for Jamal Williams if he is still available, and you can kind of sneak that back guy through there. My only concern with Craig Reynolds, what kind of role is he going to have? Because you're kind of throwing a dart. I don't know that you're going to start in week 4. So you're kind of throwing a dart on week 5 off what you're either seeing production-wise from week 4, utility-wise, or if something were to happen to Jamal Williams, because that week 6 bye is coming up, and then you're going to have Swift back after that.
Yep. All right. Well, those are our running back pickups. We love Williams. We love Herbert, and Madison being the top 3. So, yeah, let's jump into wide receivers. All right. Romeo Dobbs highlights our list. And why? Why Romeo Dobbs? Well, he had 8 catches for 73 yards and a touchdown last week. Let's see. His 16 targets leads the Packers, and he's got a 70% team target share that also leads the Packers in a Packers team where we're not quite sure exactly how that wide receiver core is going to shape out. Right now, Dobbs is looking pretty good, and last week, if that's any indication, I think he's a valuable pickup.
Yeah, this was a summer drumbeat that, you know, he kind of, a lot of people were talking about him during the summer and as his performance. I think week 1, they really just couldn't get that offense rolling. Week 2 was that weird game with Chicago where they were playing from ahead the entire game, and the Bears really just weren't threatening him at all. Week 3, it kind of looked like now with Sammy Watkins out of the lineup, they said, we've just got to let this guy go, and he delivered. And so if he's out there, he is a priority pickup because he could be that wide receiver 1 for Aaron Rodgers in this offense throughout the season.
There you go. Yep. So we like Dobbs. Russell Gage seems to be the wide receiver that's shining here for the Bucs and for Tom Brady when everything else is a miss, right? Mike Evans had the suspension. He also had the hamstring. Chris Godwin is out also with the hamstring and the knee recovery. So Russell Gage, all he's done is get 19 catches in 3 games. And he has 19% team target share, equal to what Mike Evans is when he plays. So it'll be interesting to see how he'll be used when Evans returns. But 12 catches last week, 87 yards and a touchdown. Obviously, Tom Brady has no problem throwing to him, which is a good sign. That means he's running his routes. We know that if you don't run your route, you're not getting the ball in Tom Brady's offense. So Gage is someone that we like. Your thoughts about him moving forward, Jeff? You know, once Godwin returns And Evans, of course, is in the offense. Is Gage a key part of this, or is this a flash in the pan?
I hesitate to call him a flash in the pan, but I do think that we had a perfect storm last week with Mike Evans being out, with a game script that forced them to play from behind through the entire game. That's kind of where a lot of that production came from. If Chris Godwin's back and if he's able to get back to full speed and you've got Mike Evans there, I think a lot of people are looking at this as maybe the Antonio Brown role, but I don't know that Gage has the playmaking ability for Brown. And I don't know if he can kind of have those big splash plays that allowed you to play Brown, whereas he relies more on just kind of that steady production. And I wonder if this is a guy that he'll see play, he'll get 5 to 6 targets a week, and maybe it's a touchdown, but you're really kind of ending up more with 4 catches for 45 yards and maybe a touchdown when those other 2 guys are back in the lineup.
There you go. All right. I like it. Let's move on to Zay Jones. And Zay Jones is kind of the quiet surprise here. He is kind of like the Christian Kirk light, if you will. Right now it's Christian Kirk and it's Zay Jones as the top receivers in the Jacksonville offense. And Zay Jones, 19 catches, actually leads the team. He's got a 22% team target share. Christian Kirk at 25%. So it's 1A and 1B. We know about Christian Kirk because he has the 3 touchdowns so far, and he's also got a lot of yards. But Zay Jones isn't that far behind, especially if you look at the numbers and the stats. And I already mentioned that the Jaguars scored 62 points in the last 2 games. Zay Jones, I really like this.
Yeah, I do too. And what the Jaguars are doing with their receivers, you see a lot of teams will have receivers that this guy's the vertical guy and this guy's the underneath guy. What Zay Jones and what Christian Kirk are able to do is able to kind of trade off in those roles and be used in different areas of the field. And so we've seen great production from Zay Jones, and there's no reason to think this can't keep up. This was a guy that he had a great window of production last year towards the end of the year with the Raiders, and he was really kind of moving on to fantasy radars there, and they obviously paid him in the offseason. They were willing to bring him in.
Yep, I like it. I really would not mind having Zay Jones as a flex starter on my teams. He's that good. You don't just get 22% team target share for nothing, right? So yeah. I like that. KJ Osborne, he had 5 touchdowns last year. Already has 1 this year. He kind of took over a little bit on the Vikings offense with Justin Jefferson, who held up with Jeff Okudah, who's really coming on strong for the Lions as far as their secondary and their corner spot. Osborne, he's someone that he's getting the snaps. Vikings run a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. Osborne, man, what's your thoughts on him?
You hit it exactly. The 3 wide receiver sets, Kevin O'Connell coming over from the Rams. We saw the Rams in the past where that couple of years back when they had Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks, and Cooper Kupp, creating situations where you can play all 3 wide receivers. And Osborne's talented, and it looked, he got the targets last week. Some of that was in the back and forth game. Some of that was just Jefferson being shut down, but he's going to be on the field a lot, and he is able to produce.
Yep, I like it. And also Jameson Williams here, number 5. This is also kind of like a preemptive type of pickup. Now's the time to get him. Remember, he's coming off of the ACL injury. He's the 12th overall pick from Alabama, 6'2" receiver. He's got the pedigree. We already know what he's capable of in college. What if he joins this Lions team and, is a huge compliment to Amon-Ra St. Brown? Jameson Williams, man, he could be a starter for your team here in the second half of the season, perhaps.
Yeah, and the thing to watch with him is a lot of people drafted him and stashed him in IR spots at the beginning of the season, but now you're starting to see, especially with these running back injuries that we had, some of these guys that are more high value, more priorities are moving into those IR spots in a lot of leagues, and that might force a team to make a cut and allow Jameson Williams to go. And so this is a kind of a second waiver move where after the waivers run, watch those and see the players that are dropped. And Jameson Williams could be one of those players that you're able to pick up, put on your roster, drop in your IR spot, and kind of have that stash for later in the season.
Yep, that's absolutely right. And we got Mac Hollins on here. Now, all he did was have a 158-yard game with a touchdown last week. He's a big receiver, man, 6'4", 221. He's going to be used in the end zone. We've already seen that. Maybe when Hunter Renfrow comes back, that volume kind of dips back down a little bit. You also have Darren Waller in the mix, in addition to, of course, the elephant in the room, Devontae Adams. But does Mac Hollins have any type of role, or are we chasing points here, do you think?
I think he has a real role because he's that outside receiver opposite Devonte Adams. And we know that Hunter Renfrow, he's going to be a slot guy. And, you might put Darren Waller outside a little bit, but you're going to keep him more at the tight end. That's where the value is for him. Matt Collins is going to be on the field. And Derek Carr in the past, he's shown, last year when he had Henry Ruggs at the beginning part of the season and then kind of Zay Jones moving into that role later in the season, he's created fantasy value for that player that can attack vertically. And that's really Holland's role in this offense. He's really almost the free version of Gabe Davis, where, you're expecting the big plays, you're expecting the touchdowns, attacking vertically. And when you look at it, we talk about Renfrow, we talk about Darren Waller, and we talk about Devonte Adams. Devonte Adams can win all over the field, but his ADOT has come down over the last couple of years, and he's kind of turned more into that receiver that he wants the ball a little bit quicker, able to create after the catch a little bit. We know what Renfrow does. Hollins is really the piece in there that might make this offense go as the guy that can stretch the field vertically, and as the defense comes up to take care of those other pieces, it really just need one play out of him, and he makes a great play for the week.
Yep, I like that. I like that call a lot. That Gabe Davis comparison is interesting in that role. So if he turns into a Gabe Davis of 2021, hey, we might be onto something here. Let's run through these real quickly here. Devonte Parker and Laviska Shenault. Of course, Shenault had the big catch for Carolina that was, it was like a 1 yard throw and he went the distance essentially. But Devonte Parker came in strong for Jacoby Myers, who's out with that knee injury. But Mac Jones is out of the picture now. What's Brian Hoyer going to do? So we're a little iffy about Parker, and we don't really know too much about Baker Mayfield and his offense in Carolina. These are kind of, like if you had to pick up a guy type of moves, I think. Your thoughts on these two?
Well, I think Laviska Shenault is chasing points there off of one big play. I just don't know that there's going to really be the volume there. And if there is volume for Laviska Shenault in this offense, that's going to be very, very bad for DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey. So, hopefully rational coaching takes over there. Devonte Parker, that's a guy that Jacoby Myers was out of the lineup. And I think that don't let that go under the radar because Jacoby Myers was kind of breaking out as their primary receiver. And I think that they're playing from behind the entire game, and I think Mac Jones kind of locked on to Devonte Parker a little bit with his safety blanket, Jacoby Myers out, and that's kind of what allowed Parker's volume to tick up there. Obviously, he made the plays, and we've seen this in the past that he's a player capable of making those plays, but with Brian Hoyer in the lineup, it just really kind of turns south very quickly.
Yeah. Oh, man. A lot of receivers in this particular group this week, so we're going a little long on that. But let's move into tight ends. And we got David Njoku, who had a good week last week for Cleveland against Pittsburgh. 9 catches, 89 yards, and a touchdown. That's Travis Kelce type numbers right there. He's second on the team in targets behind Amari Cooper, 18% team target share, which is excellent for a tight end. Njoku, man, he seems like he's a player that has surprised me the most because I was all out on Njoku this season because I'm thinking, he's been in the league a few years, hasn't really shown us really much. What's he going to do? Is he going to pull a rabbit out of the hat? Well, guess what? He's pulled a rabbit out of the hat, at least last week. And the way that it's looking like he's being used, hey, maybe he's someone who can start. So what are your thoughts on Njoku?
Yeah, anytime you can get an athletic tight end that has volume, you're going to do it. And Njoku looks like he's going to be that second wide receiver, essentially, for the Browns passing offense. And we know towards the end of the season that Hammer's waiting for Deshaun Watson to come back. And what could this be for the playoff time?
That's true. All right, Tyler Conklin. Wow, surprise there, right? But what's he going to do with Zach Wilson? And maybe he's a Joe Flacco favorite. So a little bit of uncertainty, a little bit of the unknown clarity there when Wilson returns. But Conklin so far, man, looking pretty good, getting the catches. And, of course, the Jets are getting a lot of plays offensively.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. The plays offensively, the being in game scripts that have allowed Joe Flacco to throw all those passes. We've seen a lot of Jets weapons emerge a little bit as fantasy players, but instead of 50 passes, if Zach Wilson is more of a 35 pass guy, does everybody tick off a little bit there? And is there no one clear option there? And it kind of makes everybody into back end plays. But Conklin, his volume, I believe he's tight end 3 in terms of targets. And so he's a guy that I think right now you need to go out and get.
Yep. And Robert Tonyan is starting to come around a little bit, coming off that ACL injury. Maybe this is his chance to kind of really feel some confidence in that knee. Seems like he's starting to make a little bit of a push for that Packers offense. So your thoughts about him?
Obviously, this is an ambiguous target situation without having that true alpha receiver there. So Tonyan is a player that has Aaron Rodgers' trust as he's able to return. The hope is that he kind of uses that wide receiver background that he possesses, and we see the Robert Tonyan from 2020 that allowed him to be a top 5 fantasy tight end.
Yep. Yeah. And Hayden Hurst, former former first round tight end pick. Trying to find his place in Cincinnati. He's kind of doing that. I mean, like a 5-catch game seems like it's kind of average for him right now. Is he someone that you can insert into your lineup?
I think if you're desperate, but I think really to get value out of this, you're hoping for that touchdown in the Bengals offense because, yes, he's had a couple 5-catches games, but that kind of really feels like his real ceiling with the wide receivers that they have.
Gotcha. All right. Well, those are our top pickups. Let's talk about who we can drop, Jeff. So who can we drop? Isaiah Likely, man, he had such a nice preseason game, and there was a lot of speculation that he might potentially be the slot receiver for the Ravens. Not so much, right?
No,
Joe, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, you're good. Run through the whole list. I don't really have a lot to add there.
Gotcha. All right. Well, Joe Flacco, obviously he's moving on because Wilson's returning. Justin Fields, man, he can't buy some success right now. Jamison Crowder's being phased out. Amir Abdullah with the Raiders. Any thoughts on Abdullah? I know he was someone that you mentioned.
Yeah, he was a guy that coming into the season, I think a lot of people were hopefully he would have that James White role, but it looks pretty clear that that's going to be Brandon Bolden. And, even when Bolden was out of the lineup week 2, we really didn't see much from Amir Abdullah. So if you've got him in a very deep league, I think he's safe to let go.
Yeah, Brandon Bolden, of course, that Patriots connection with McDaniels. So, So those are the guys you can drop. I'm sure there's others as well, but those are our guys I think we both agree, and perhaps a guy that you can pick up. Let's talk about that. Our preemptive pickups. Wrong slide. All right. So we got Jameson Williams, of course. We already mentioned him. Jordan Mason. My gosh, it's Jeff Wilson until it's not in San Francisco, I think is kind of how you look at that. And Mason is someone who could perhaps make a splash, right? Jaylen Warren, I think he looked pretty decent in the game against Cleveland. Had that one long gain. I think he also had one that was called back due to an offensive holding. Warren is someone, and especially if there's some foot issues still lingering with Najee Harris, or if that gets worse, Warren is someone who could potentially be a starter for you. Michael Gallup, of course, coming back from his ACL. I think he's at like 8 months or 8.5 months of post-surgery. So it's almost time for him to come back. And then, of course, Brian Robinson. I really am kind of curious to hear your thoughts, Jeff, on how Washington's going to use Antonio Gibson and potentially Brian Robinson. I know you know Robinson from your college knowledge here. What can you share with us about Robinson and why he might be someone that is going to platoon at worst with Gibson in Washington?
So he's a very polished running back. He was very experienced at Alabama. Really only got 1 year starting there, sitting behind Najee Harris. Obviously, Jaylen Warren's backing him up, but he's a player. He brings pass protection that Antonio Gibson kind of struggles with. He brings ball security that Antonio Gibson has struggled with, and I think he could emerge as the short yardage back. Washington so far has looked like a high volume passing offense, and I don't know if that's how they want to play or not, but if he's splitting time with Antonio Gibson, depending on who gets that goal line back, you might not be able to play the other one, and that's scary for Antonio Gibson.
Yeah, and I want to throw another player into this mix, and I know you have something to say about him. Can we potentially pick up James Cook? Do you think he's going to be involved here? We haven't really seen much, but he's starting to get a little bit more play. Is he someone that we should be targeting right now, Jeff?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go back and watch the Dolphins-Bills game, he didn't get a lot of looks, but they were using him out wide as a wide receiver, and he has that ability and that lining him up throughout the field. And the other thing too, Devin Singletary set a career high with 11 targets, and he had 9 catches, also a career high. So we've seen in the past, Josh Allen has not used that running back, but using that second-round pick on James Cook, Ken Dorsey, the new offensive coordinator, he was around Christian McCaffrey in Carolina. James Cook was brought there for a reason, and I think he kind of eased his way in, but it's encouraging that they're willing to line him up out wide, and it's also encouraging that we're seeing Josh Allen use those running backs in the passing game.
Gotcha. So even though James Cook is not on our board here, let's talk. We talked about him, and we think that he should be. So if he's available, we think he's a decent preemptive pickup. All right, awesome. Well, let's talk about our streaming options for defense. All right, let's see. What do we got? We got Green Bay. Guess what? They get the who knows who quarterback is, Patriots. Brian Hoyer, most likely. This game is in Green Bay. New England's going to struggle. I think the line's like 10.5 right now. I would say Green Bay is a great offense to pick, or great defense to pick up here. Their next 3 games, all at home. Patriots, Giants, Jets, Packers, man. I don't think you can do any better than that as far as the defense that you target here.
No, and I think that's exactly what you're looking for in a streaming defense. Somebody that you can pick up and kind of not worry about for a couple weeks and not have to play that game for a couple weeks.
Yep, and Denver also. How many punts did they force against San Francisco? They get the 0-3 Raiders, and then they're home against the Colts. And the Colts on the road, they might be beatable here, right? Only 1 win so far, so we like Denver. Minnesota, they have at New Orleans, and then home for Chicago, divisional matchup there. And then the Giants have Chicago. I think I forget who they have week 5. It's not really the best one, but at least for this week, the Giants are a pretty decent pickup.
Well, I think they have the Packers because, at the top
Hello!
You're good.
McFly. All right. Yeah, sorry about that. Can you tell I'm red?
You're good. Anyway. You're good. No, but I think that you look through these defenses and I think that Minnesota matchup, having Jameis Winston, we've seen him kind of turn into a pumpkin here as of late. And obviously Carolina had a massive game last week against him. And then Justin Fields, who knows where that could go. I think Denver's a great call. And Raiders have turned the ball over in Indianapolis. It just seems like Matt Ryan is going to have at least that 1 interception to start the game before he settles in.
There you go. Well, excellent. Those are our defensive streaming pickups. That's essentially our show. I do want to say, everybody who's watching here, thanks for watching. You can definitely give Champions Round a follow here. Download the app, play their games. Of course, you got Sunday's Best, which is basically you're picking a quarterback, a running back, a receiver, and a tight end in a snake draft with like 5 other teams. It's perfect. It's only the Sunday games. It's a lot of fun. And you've got the Daily Dozen every day. Make sure you play that for football. That's also a lot of fun. And the 7 stakes contest as well. Champion John always giving away free stuff. So download the app, play, tell your friends. And Jeff, thanks so much for coming on. I really enjoyed this. You brought a lot of information here to the show, and I appreciate it. And I'm sure everybody else did as well.
Thank you for having me. And again, Champions Round's fantastic. Make sure to check them out. Great team over there. Thank you so much, Jeff.
All right. Thank you. And we will see you next week, week 5.